I'm sorry it's taking so long for those that have been waiting for this. Hey yo, what's going on my street people? It's DS Pyro coming in with another video. Before I even jump into it, like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, all that good jazz. Anyway, now that we got that out of the way, like I said in the intro of this, sorry it's taking so long for those of you who were waiting for this video. This is another episode of Think Tank, which for this particular type of topic, I may change to another thing called bringing in to the MCU. Yeah, I'll work on the title maybe. But yes, we are going to be talking about a specific character. In case you couldn't tell by the title, it will be Nova, and bringing him into the MCU. Why are we bringing him into the MCU? Well, I mean, we recently had SDCC, which I'm sorry I didn't make a video for. I did, but then my camera equipment messed up and I was like, you know what? Save it for another day. Let's save it for another day and then start filming and we're good to go. And this is that other day. And even though I've done this video before and it still didn't work, it was a terrible video, so I never edited and made it. But anyway, this is the video. So the idea that we heard Kevin Feige saying is that Phase 4, or at the very least Phase 4 ongoing, will be a lot more spacefaring. However, with the announcement of SDCC for movies and the TV shows, there's only one that could possibly be in space, and that was Thor: Love and Thunder. At the end of Endgame, we do see Thor with the Asgardians, and apparently this movie is set during that time, but he'll break off or something from the information that we've gotten, along with female Thor, Mighty Thor, Jane Foster, Natalie Portman, which is great. But yeah, so there isn't much in the way of making a movie that is going to be spacefaring so far, but we're nerds, so let's talk about having Nova in this. So like I said before, why Nova? Nova is actually a badass. That's pretty much the main reason why. I guess the key question is, why is he a badass? So to list off his powers to show why he's a badass, well, he's got super flight, which is useful for a character that actually spends a lot of time in space. Super strength, because he is hella strong. Super speed, he's actually pretty fast. He's not a speedster, but you know, super speed, and he's got that going on. He's got super durability, which, sure, he's durable, which is always useful to being a superhero. He's excellent at hand-to-hand combat, which is also really useful being a superhero. Let's see him fight Captain America. Probably not now because he's kind of old Cap and probably could lead S.H.I.E.L.D., but you see what I'm getting at. So I don't know about currently because I haven't read the most recent Nova comics, but he has what could be used in the MCU, something called the World Mine. Now the World Mine is actually the last of all of Xandar's world or galaxy information, I guess you could say, which houses, definitely as far as the Xandarians are concerned, all of their history, all of their tactical stuff, all of their military, their arts, hobbies, everything Xandarian, the World Mine has it. And this does include the Nova Force, which is basically like how Nova and all the other Novas, which I will touch upon, are powered. So as the last of the Nova Corps, in terms of like his most main stories, that's what he is. He has control over all of that power, and he uses the World Mine to control that power. And speaking of power like that, he can actually create like wormholes, like literal wormholes. And speaking of those wormholes, he can survive going through a wormhole. He will take a bit of damage, definitely. But again, being super durable, he's good. So, you know, he's pretty badass. Pretty badass. So when a Nova movie has already like got great precedents to be in the MCU, because the Nova Corps has already been established in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, and they ended up with the Power Stone, which lends itself well to how you can introduce Nova, Richie Rider, into the MCU. Before we jump into what could possibly be the MCU origins of the character, let's talk about his origins in the comics. And we'll make this quick and sweet because admittedly, I'm not that kind of channel. I'm definitely not that kind of channel. The last of the Nova Corps previously, or one of the last of the Nova Corps, I guess is more apt to say, Roman Day was basically on his deathbed. Can't remember the exact panel and how it looked, but he was on his deathbed, ready to die, and he effectively nominated Richard Rider, to become the next Nova, the one and only Nova, basically. And that's basically what's happened. It's very similar to a character like Green Lantern. I guess you could say sort of similar to Captain Marvel-ish, depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, in terms of being chosen by an alien or because of an alien, you now have superpowers. It's kind of a meld of that, but definitely a lot closer to Green Lantern, who again was given the Green Lantern power or the authority, whatever you want to call it, to do that. If you don't know Green Lantern, that's probably a terrible reference, but he was given power by an alien, basically. That's what happened. So he gets the powers and he becomes a Nova Centurion, the last of the Nova Corps. So, I mean, you could really adapt this very easily, like I said before, into the MCU, like they've done with Helmut Zemo. He's very different to how he is in the comics in terms of his look and his mannerisms. Overall, he's very calculated and plotting, yes, but the rest of it, like his maniacalness and so on, is not present in the MCU. Maybe we'll catch that in Falcon and Winter Soldier. We'll see what happens with that character. He is wearing his mask, and Daniel Brühl, please, you just continue your good work. That's all we want. And further adaptations that are very loosely connected to the comics are Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. So with them in the comics, they're actually mutants, but at the time when they were introduced into Avengers Age of Ultron, into the MCU, they weren't allowed to be called mutants or anything like that because Fox still owned the rights to that word. So they adapted them to become miracles, as Baron von Strucker, I believe it was, called them at the end of Captain America Winter Soldier to be announced in Avengers Age of Ultron. That's what they were called, and their powers come from the Mind Stone, I believe it is. I can't remember. Tell me in the comments section below where their power came from. So like with these three characters, adjust the story a little bit, and what I will do right now is a little bit of theory. I like a little bit of theory, we all do, onto how you can introduce the character of Nova, Richard Rider, into the MCU. So like I said before, the power part of this kind of stems from Thanos, because at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, the Power Stone is with the Nova Core, and we know at the beginning of Infinity War, Thanos has pretty much destroyed what we can assume half of the Nova Core at the very least, and taken the Power Stone. So that would be the kind of key factor in Richard Rider becoming Nova Core and how I will adapt it now. So starting from the beginning, we actually have Richard Rider living on Earth, just like, really cool dude and just chilling. And his best friend happens to be Peter Quill. During this time when they're really young, they grew up together, Peter Quill does actually end up getting taken by the Ravagers from what we've seen in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. So that has that connection right there. He spent a long time actually looking for Peter Quill, trying to find out what happened and so on. And then what actually happens, he is then taken by the Ravagers as well, but is then left on the planet of Xandar. I know that's kind of lazy, but work with me on this. I'm just a theory guy. At this point in time, he's actually grown up Xandarian. How he can breathe in Xandar without any help, I don't know, but he can. So he's grown up Xandarian, so he feels like a true Xandarian. Although he does know his roots lie on Earth, this is where he stands as growing up within their society and being accepted as well. In that time while he's been on Xandar, he's actually joined their army and has become a patrolman for the Nova Corps, and he actually runs into Peter Quill later in his life. I'm not quite sure where this would roll into, but it would definitely have to be set before Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, or at the very least before Volume 2, where things go a bit haywire, but somewhere in between, I would say 2013, 2012, up until, at the very least, I believe it is 2015 or 2016, when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is set. I think the best place for them to actually have this meetup, because Peter Quill has become Starlord and doing a lot of things, this is why they're effectively, you could say, on his tail, they would probably meet up at the Nowhere. Not the Nowhere, but at Nowhere, the place that you do see in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, and you see it in Infinity War, meeting at this place where all of these people probably do meet up, or Contraxia, where Rocket got the eyeball that he gives to Thor in Infinity War. These two places are probably the best places for them to meet up and have a nice little reminiscing time for the time that they spent together on Earth, and talk about him trying to find him, and then him realizing that Peter Quill is Star-Lord. Or Starlord is Peter Quill. I think that would probably be better. In terms of the better place though, Nowhere is probably a better place for them, because that is actually where Nova spends a lot of his time with, and we've got Cosmo the dog in Nova comics as well as we already know he is already on the planet, the skull of Nowhere, which is really weird to say because of the end credits in Guardians of the Galaxy as well. So having that would be really cool to see, having a telepathic dog, and then that connection between them and Nova, which again I'll touch upon later on when I talk about why I've chosen Peter Quill for this connection. So that's kind of like the basis of the introduction, like the plot points that you could have in a Nova movie, or even just like parts of it through a flashback or something along those lines. Doing these kinds of things with Nova would be amazing, along with Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and even introducing him to the Guardians of the Galaxy overall. But we'll see how that plays out later on with Guardians 3 and so on. So why have I chosen Peter Quill? And you'll see why now. So Peter Quill is actually best friends with Star-Lord in the comics as adults, once they've actually become superheroes and so on. but adjusting this for the MCU, I think, would be a stroke of genius by the writers of MCU. Maybe they might do something better, they might not, I don't know. But they are best friends in the comics for a number of years. Another connection that they have is actually that Richard Rider, along with Starlord in the comics, actually has a relationship with Gamora. So this can be a cause of tension possibly in the movie, or a connection between them knowing and speaking with Gamora. This would have to be at this point in time, pre-2014 Gamora, I presume, or it could be in between that time. But from 2014 onwards, Gamora has spent her whole time with the Guardians of the Galaxy. As for progressing, though, the characters that you have with the MCU, he does have a lot of characters that he can introduce being spacefaring, such as Cosmo. Properly introduce him, not just as an end credit scene, but introduce him properly into the comics. You also have Kid Nova, or he's just known as Nova to be fair, and that is actually Sam Alexander. The way this can be introduced, in the comics, Sam Alexander is actually, his father is actually a member of the Black Novas, I believe it is. I can't remember exactly what they're called, and they have black helmets and they have a portion of Nova for. They're more stealth based rather than just kind of like, you know, guarding the galaxy, like being the police of the galaxy. But it's really cool that you can introduce that side of the Nova Corps. Or what you could do is make Sam Alexander Sam Rider and make it Richard Rider's son. It'd be very interesting if they could do that to make it more of a natural progression, or they could do something similar to what you had with Iron Man, Tony Stark, and Peter Parker, Spider-Man, possibly, but maybe they probably would want to avoid that because of how strongly we overall felt towards that initial relationship, the father-son relationship they had. In terms of, say, villains, you've got Annihilus, who's actually a pretty big villain. I'm not the biggest fan of him or his look overall, but he's pretty much a badass in the world of villains. Now, the reason why I say Annihilus would be interesting is because Nova, Richard Rider, actually puts his hand down Annihilus's throat into his guts and pulls out his guts. Like, literally pulls out his guts. That is actually badass. Now, I don't see Disney doing that in their movie, but we'll see. Maybe they can edit it in such a way where it's just like you see the hand and then you see the end results of it. But doing that would be badass. You might find a picture here of that happening, but overall, Nova's a pretty badass character. So I'm just gonna list off right now the top points as to why he should be in there. The first point of that is literally that he is a fresh new character. Name, not so much personality, because the problem is that he's cocky and hot-headed and funny. However, the problem that he may suffer is that he may very well be compared to Iron Man in the same way that Doctor Strange's movie was compared to being this hot-headed, cocky, smart, albeit very smart character, is basically awful about themselves. Something bad happens to them and they learn to be about the other person, the need of the many. I think what could be adjusted is that Nova, Richard Rider, is already aware of the need of many, and that's why he's joined the army. So I think doing that would be really good for his overall character to try and differentiate him. Is that the right word? Make him different. Let's go with make him different to Iron Man and Doctor Strange. I think the comedic dynamic that you would have between Peter Quill and Nova would be amazing. It'd be something like very much akin to the way Thor and Peter Quill are in Avengers Endgame and in Infinity War. I think doing that would be good, but make it a bit more of a buddy kind of feel, like they're actual friends rather than they're in competition. Thirdly, bringing in new characters is always a fun thing to do, and his own mythos, you can dive into the Nova Corps and how they started and the characters that they deal with, because they deal with a number of characters across all of the comics that I can't even think of right now. So doing that would be like really, really good. Yeah. And like I said before, we have Sam Alexander, and he's actually part of a team called the Champions. Now that Disney, Marvel have everyone back at home, aka meaning Fox, meaning the mutants, and all the other characters that were sold off, Ghost Rider and everything, you can have the Champions, which does include Cyclops. Amadeus chose Totally Awesome Hulk, but you've got the X-Men Cyclops, and you can bring him in, which might be probably the best way to do it, which I may do a video on how to bring the X-Men in, but we'll see. I probably tend to stick these videos with lesser known characters that should be in the MCU. Quick heads up, next time on bringing into the MCU, as part of Think Tank, we are actually going to be talking about Beta Ray Bill. That is also something that people have been waiting for. I know the streets have been waiting for that. I know, and I'm sorry again, it's going to come up. Anyways, dudes, leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. all that jazz. Make sure you share this with your friends and also share it with your enemies if you didn't like it, so if they listen to my voice and watch my face. I hope it's a pretty face. If you don't think it is, still share it around. I don't care. There's gonna be videos in this area here. I should know by now where they are, but I don't. Anyways, dudes, I still don't have a sign off yet. Peace.